Hey everyone, this is a bonus episode of the Slash Filmcast. We're recording this before Thanksgiving. You're probably listening to it afterwards. Hope you had a good holiday weekend, spent some time with family or friends. We certainly did. I'm here with Jeff Kanata. Jeff, how are
Hey
you doing
Dave,
today?
I'm doing great, man. I can't wait to be post Thanksgiving. I love Thanksgiving. I
Yeah,
love the feeling
Thanksgiving's
of
great. It's not like super
yeah.
commercial yet, from my perspective. It
No,
hasn't sold out quite yet, you know? So it's one
fair
of the good
enough.
ones.
Yeah, the day after, however, that's a little
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The day after. That's a little, yeah, that's right.
little different.
Okay, so we're here to talk about the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, which is
Yeah,
an anthology of 6 short films that take place in 19th century post-Civil War era during the settling of the Old West, written and directed by the Coen brothers. And this movie is out on Netflix right now. And you saw it, I saw it. I thought we would just record a little conversation where we talk about general thoughts, and then dive
yeah.
into each one of these one by one and talk about like each of the 6 stories.
I think
Um,
this is going to make a kind of a lovely companion piece to our discussion about Red Dead Redemption 2.
Yeah, which you can find on DLC podcast at 5 by
Yeah,
5.tv/DLC, right?
that's right. Yeah, we
Uh,
had Dave swung by and we talked about that, and I feel like I don't know. That game coming out and this movie hitting Netflix all around the same time. It's an interesting juxtaposition for me.
Overall thoughts on the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, Jeff?
I loved it. I loved it. I love it. I am a huge Coen Brothers fan. That goes without saying. I think anybody who loves movies at least likes some of their movies, and I think I like more than most. I mean, I love Burn After Reading and a lot of movies that people don't care for so much. Their aesthetic is my aesthetic. It turns out, oftentimes, I love how they turn a phrase. I mean, I'm a language junkie, and they seem to revel in the use of language and I describe this particular film as, if Black Mirror is Twilight Zone, but for future tech, near future tech, this is the Twilight Zone for the West. This is like, what if they made a Twilight Zone series, but it only took place in the Wild West? And I love that. I mean, I love that template of the Twilight Zone of short films or, you know, um, Tales from the Crypt or something like that. Those anthology TV series that often don't have lighthearted endings, or often drip with irony, or the main characters get themselves into situations that of their own making that often have grim ends. Um, I'm taken with that template, and this does that. And I found out actually long after I watched the film that this was intended to be a TV series. Isn't that right?
Well, the Coen brothers have insisted that it was always meant to be a series of films, and that it was never meant to be a TV series.
One
But
film all smushed together, not a TV series that had specific broken out episodes. Is what you're
yeah,
saying.
like it's been going around a lot. Like a lot of people have been saying, like, "Oh, it was meant to be a TV series. It was meant to be a TV series." I've seen that written a lot, but the Hollywood Reporter has this piece where they say, Joel Cohen told a press conference at the New York Film Festival that the idea that it was going to be a TV series, quote, "that's an artifact of just what a strange animal it was. They didn't know. None of us really know what to call it or how to classify it. But aside from the confusion about classification, the actual what we were going to shoot, the length of each of the stories, all of which vary, there was never anything that we were considering doing any differently. There were never any more stories, and they were always intended to be seen as a group," end quote. So it's, I don't think, I don't think it's true. Basically, based on that
Fair.
statement, it sounds like they my understanding of the background of these stories is that they were written many years ago as like a series of shorts where they put them in a drawer because they're like, hey, we're never gonna make this, or we won't be able to make this for like 10 years,
Yeah.
because I mean, they're not commercial friendly. They're not
Right.
movies that you could get a big movie studio to finance for you necessarily. Certainly, that would be a challenge under any circumstance. But with the new streaming era that we're in, anything's possible. Anything's possible.
It does feel like it would be an unwieldy theatrical experience.
Can
There's
you
something
imagine?
about
Like, I can't imagine anyone showing up to this in a movie theater.
right. Yeah. It does feel like something you watch at home. And I wouldn't have minded them breaking them out, even the shorter ones and the longer ones, being
I
a
should
sort
point
of.
out. I should point out that it is in movie theaters. Like I think in New York and LA, it is possible to see it in a movie theater. So I don't mean like
Right.
it's impossible to see it in a movie theater. I can't imagine, but it's just like a major big budget release. It's not. It's no
Yeah.
True Grit. Put it that way.
Correct. Yeah. And I think it would have been perfectly palatable as a thing broken up over multiple sittings. I think that would have been fine. And it almost feels like a lot to sit back to back, but man, I loved it. Some of the stories I prefer over others. The final story I think is a bit inscrutable to me, and I can't wait till we discuss it in depth because I want to hear what you think about it. But there's just so much wonderful stuff, and it varies in tone so much. I had a great time watching it. I watched it, by the way, with my mom and my wife, and my mom loved it. My mom was howling with laughter as we watched it. She thought it was the violence in particular. She thought was so funny, which I thought was really cool. I've not seen her react that way to that kind of thing before.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good if you're a Coen Brothers fan, but if you're not, I mean, I think the quality of the shorts, or not even the quality, but the kind of tone or the way the shorts make you feel is vastly different from short to short. And overall, I found it to be very much in the Coen's wheelhouse of like what I would describe as one of the main strains in their work is existentialism, right? The idea that like man is alone in a brutal, harsh, and unforgiving universe. And that's what I feel like, runs through this. And if you want a nice dose of that, this will give you that. That's not all they're capable of doing, though. They've made movies that are very funny and that are very delightful, and
you didn't find these funny?
Some of them were funny, yeah, certainly. Certainly, the first one was very funny, but like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is like a very enjoyable comedy, and so this movie just put me in a very sad headspace. Like it
sure.
made me feel sad about the world, and if that's what you want, then I think you'll really appreciate the film. But like a lot of people might not want that. Like some people might see it as sad and mean spirited as well, right? That it's very cruel to a lot of its characters, and
sure.
I think just like Jeff, you and I have talked about this is a long running conversation on the podcast about like what is the media we want to consume during this time in our lives, and do we want things that make us happy or sad, and is the sadness give us catharsis or does it not? And this is just these shorts are exceptionally well made. The cinematography by Bruce Delbonnel is exquisite, and it makes these vistas in the American West look so beautiful that you can't, like, I don't even believe that it was like not CG enhanced in some way because it's so gorgeous and perfect.
Oh, I think there's a lot of CG at work, actually.
Yeah. So,
but
you mean people don't fly up into the sky like angels? I thought it was really there's a lot of details. The production design and production values are excellent. So it's not like there's a lot to recommend it, but it just left me in a bad mood. It left me feeling bad about the world, and I don't know that that's necessarily what I wanted. Right?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a fair point, but I also I think the comparison to Twilight Zone is apt in the sense that it is not just empty cruelty. It is not just empty nihilism. It is but for one turn, everything could have been fine, but for one moment. And I think there is something to be taken away from the outcomes of each of the stories. There is, even in the cruelest moments, there are these takeaways that don't feel like the filmmakers are just, masochistic to their characters. It really feels like there's some lesson to be learned in the same way that, it's cruel to have the man who all he wants to do is read, step on his glasses, at the end of that's cruel, right? But there's some takeaway of that. There's some irony that resonates. And I think that these, for me, do as well. But
No, I think
I take your point.
that's a great comparison, right? You know, that the idea of a dude who always wanted to read and he has all the books and time in the world, but now his glasses are broken. You know, that feeling you have when you contemplate that situation, time enough at last, that episode of the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
That's very much the feeling you get while you're watching this movie, right? Of
Yes.
like this cruel ironies that befall these characters. And yeah, if that's the kind of thing you want to get into, I think this movie will serve that up to varying degrees of success. And why don't we talk about that? Yeah.
Yeah. Let's.
So let's dive into the spoilers for the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, starting right now. So this movie is divided into 6 little vignettes. Let's talk about them each one by one. By the way, like ostensibly these are part of a storybook, which I did some Googling, and apparently there's no actual book, right? It's not based on a real book.
But it's awesome that conceit is so well illustrated. Like the it's got that wax paper page.
No, it's
and
perfect.
It's got
it's perfect.
And the fact that when one of the stories completes and it cuts back to the last page of the story, reading what's written on the page actually gives you more information about what you just watched.
Yeah,
it's so great.
Did you like read? Did you like freeze frame it and read it? Like
yeah, a couple of times.
I paused every single one of those and read it. Yeah, so
cool.
Okay, so the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, the first one, right?
Yeah.
You have. What's his name? The Tim Blake Nelson as Buster Scruggs, singing his way through the Monument Valley, and I'm gonna like read a little bit from the Wikipedia entry here, but like he explains to the audience that he is known as an outlaw and misanthrope, although he actually harbors no dislike of his fellow man. We see him murder a bunch of dudes. We see him play a poker game and kill a dude that like threatens him. And then he
hilariously,
has like
all of them very funny kills.
And he has a couple of like showdowns and like loses one. And so where I appreciated this is this idea that what this short does for me is many depictions of cowboys are very positive and jovial, right? And it's like you know, like they talk in an amiable fashion and they're friendly, and like there's many depictions we've seen on like TV and in film and in cartoons and whatever where the cowboy's like very kind and so on. And what I like about this is like outlaws are often seen to be like lovable characters, and what this short shows is actually like the brutality. It juxtaposes this kind of over the top friendliness of outlaws with the brutality that they inflict on other people, right? And like drawing attention to the fact that hey, this guy may be friendly and talk really in a way that in a drawl and in a syntax that you find charming, but he will shoot a dude in the head if it serves him well, you know. And I really enjoyed this. I thought this was one of the better ones.
I loved it too. His sort of starch white, pristine, unmussed, almost like Hollywood-esque, cowboy outfit. It's so when he steps into what is sort of realistic, Old West town with a bunch of realistic looking bad guys, and he looks like he stepped right off of the silver screen of somebody that isn't actually a cowboy at all, and yet outperforms them and is superior to them in every respect, and more brutal than they and more ruthless than they.
Yeah.
And I love, this is another example of the Coens' just love of language, and I'm so intoxicated by that with their movies. Their characters don't talk like anybody else's characters, and they also don't talk like any of the other characters from any of their other movies. They find a way to give a vernacular and a cadence to their characters that is wholly unique, and I find to be absolutely delightful.
Indeed. Okay, so the next one is called Near Algodones, right? And it's about a young cowboy played by James Franco who tries to rob a bank, and then he is apprehended, and as he is about to be hung, and ambushing Comanche warriors slaughter the lawmen, but then, he gets absorbed by this other guy who happens to be rustling cattle, which is a thing that I learned about from Red Dead Redemption 2, that rustling cattle is basically you're stealing the cattle, right?
Right.
And apparently it's punishable by hanging, and which I also learned from Red Dead Redemption 2. And so as the cowboy stands upon the gallows with 3 other men waiting execution, he spots a beautiful young woman in the crowd and mutters, "There is a pretty girl," before the hangman abruptly hoods him and pulls the lever to cheers and applause.
Yeah, but her expression as he says that to her says everything to me.
Tell me what it says to you, Jeff.
It says, there's this moment where he believes he's making a connection with her, and she finds him repulsive, right? She finds him repugnant, and she is not there with him in his final moment. It plays like scenes you've seen in film where it was all worth it because this one moment of beauty at the end, and he has this connection with this woman, and there's some redemptive moment in his soul or some meaning that is gleaned from just the sparkle in a beautiful woman's eye. And this is her going, ew. It's so great. I just thought it kind of speaks to the toxic masculinity of the age that we're in, that topic. It seems to be resonant in that moment. But there's so much more to this one that I love than that, just that final moment. But I just thought that final moment is wonderfully ironic.
Well, there's Stephen Root giving an amazing performance in like the 3 minutes of this episode that he's in. I do think that the depiction of Native Americans is pretty unfortunate in the entire series of films. It's pretty remarkable when a video game has a more well-rounded depiction of Native Americans than a Coen Brothers film, but that's what's happened with Red Dead Redemption 2. All of the Native Americans are basically faceless, nameless savages in the movie, and it's unfortunate just because we've already seen that depiction many times, and it perpetuates unfortunate stereotypes in our society, and that's a bummer. But other than that, I thought this was good for a couple laughs, but it didn't make nearly the impression on me as it did for you, Jeff.
You didn't find that last moment to be interesting?
Yeah, I didn't. I don't know. I appreciate it more hearing you talk about it, but it wasn't particularly something that moved me when I first saw it. So
I also thought the whole thing was worth it just for that moment where he's in the second hangman's noose and he turns to the guy who's crying and says, "First time?"
Yeah, that was funny.
Such a beautiful line. Yeah.
Pretty good. Third episode, Meal Ticket. An aging impresario and his artist, a young man with no arms or legs named Harrison, travel from town to town in a wagon that converts into a small stage, where Harrison theatrically recites classics such as Shelley's poem Ozymandias, the biblical story of Cain and Abel, works by Shakespeare, and Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. So this is the one that bothered me the most, Jeff. This one was really upsetting, right?
It's just dour. Yeah, it's harsh.
Yeah. So there's a lot of great detail. I think we've had multiple people tweet at us today about this one, right? Basically asking us to talk about this story. Because there's a few great things about this story. First of all, the idea of this guy going around and reciting these things, and you see the decline in the audience, right? You see, at first there's dozens of people, and then there's fewer and fewer people. And, it reminds me of this thing. I probably have said this on the podcast, but Stephen Tobolowsky and I have done a bunch of live shows, right? And he always had this saying, as long as there's more of them than there are of us, we're doing a show, right? Yeah. And so they always...
Well, it's nice when there's two of you, or it's a one-man show. I've had that situation when you're in a 30-person Shakespeare play, and it's please let there be at least 30 people.
Yeah. Well, even in this short, it got pretty close. Right? There was one that they had 3 people, and then so they the impresario observe. So there's a scene where they go to visit a brothel, which is really super painful to watch, and then he's does this guy, has he ever been with a woman? She basically asks, and he says something like once, right? One time or something like that. And some people tweeted, I think more than one person tweeted us asking the question, what do you make of that? What is your interpretation of that scene, Jeff?
I mean, the whole thing is very sad. I mean, we should. I step back for a second and say I think this is the one that is the most exquisitely shot. I think it is stunningly shot. This one in particular, but yes, you don't ever hear the performer say anything in the entire short film other than his memorized performance lines.
Right.
You literally never hear him speak an original thought in the entire thing. But volumes are spoken, I think, with his expression. He's profoundly sad, and that pathetic way that Liam Neeson walks over and like turns him around so he won't see. But obviously he's still there and he can hear it, and it's just you get the impression. I mean, there is a lot of care that is shown from Liam Neeson in feeding him. There's a scene where I believe what you're expecting, you think you're seeing is, or what I thought I was seeing was him urinating or defecating.
Yeah,
and
helping him urinate, basically.
Yeah. So there's a huge amount of care being taken, and you could assume that at one point Liam Neeson paid for him to have that experience himself. Back maybe when they were doing much better, and the situation was more lucrative on both sides. I mean, the title of that piece is Meal Ticket, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it really is as crassly
transactional, right?
Transactional, yeah, as that.
Well,
you get the feeling that we're coming in on the waning days of this relationship, but at a certain point, it probably was a pretty lucrative one and a pretty beneficial one for both sides.
Well, it's interesting in the Wikipedia entry. It says here, their financial situation is never desperate, as the impresario can afford to visit a prostitute and later draws from a large roll of dollar bills in his coat to buy a chicken of unusual talent in hopes of supplanting Harrison's performance.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's like canonical, what's in this Wikipedia entry, but I think it is kind of interesting that it's not like they're desperate, because he does have this like huge stack of bills, right?
Right.
So that makes his actions at the end of the thing even more upsetting, right?
Right. I mean, he sees the writing on the wall, and this particular attraction is no different to him than the chicken, right? It's just the next thing that he puts up in front of the people. It's not the connection, what he's willing to do. It recontextualizes what he was willing to do throughout, where it's like it's literally just taking care of a chicken for him.
Yeah.
And which is really sad. It's profoundly sad.
What did you think of? Yeah, did you have any like backstory that you created for these people? Like, the backstory I wrote for them kind of kept changing throughout the course of the the short film.
Yeah, I mean, you can't help but wonder how they came across one another. And I think at the beginning, you get the feeling you feel like they're related in some way. The care that he shows for he feel like, oh, they're brothers or somehow related, and father and son perhaps. And they, this is how they've managed to make their way through this harsh environment. But by the end, you realize, no, this was a relationship of convenience, and it just became inconvenient for one of the parties at a certain point. So I mean, it's dark, but it's also beautiful. I found it to be really beautiful. Beautifully shot, beautifully expressed. His performances I found to be, kind of resonant as well. I mean, he does a bunch of sonnets, and he constantly does the Gettysburg Address, and you kind of you hear him over and over and over again. You start going, is there some kind of through line with this, with what these pieces are how they selected these pieces?
Yeah.
I don't know. You didn't care for it?
I just thought it was so cruel,
Yeah, it is.
Like there's so many other outcomes that the impresario could have arrived at. Like, could have abandoned him in a place where,
oh yeah,
could have abandoned him in a place where like he not necessarily could have been taken care of, but like had a chance to live, right?
Right. And just the way he tests out
the rock,
the disposal method is so matter of fact and
it's just there's no emotion in it at all.
No.
Right? It's not like he doesn't seem anguished. He's just like,
right.
That worked.
Yeah. And it's like it was about it's like it just occurred to him. They drive by that bridge and he's like, "Oh yeah, look at that. I can do that. Let's stop."
I mean, I think the thing that I find the most compelling about this story is the idea that this like extremely well educated and like talented performer is replaced by a chicken pecking things. You know?
Well, you get a sense that he has also been had, right? Like there's nothing special about that chicken. Like he's at least that's the impression that I got, is that the whatever trick that's causing the chicken to push the right number isn't because the chicken is smart or worth anything, right? Any chicken will do, but this guy gets sold a bill of goods and sees this chicken and thinks it's like this magical smart chicken, you know? And you feel like he's going to set up shop at the next town, and the chicken isn't going to do that because it's not about the chicken. It's about whatever, rigged system was in place, and he'll be sad that he threw away his previous meal ticket.
Yeah, I guess it wasn't 100% clear to me whether the rigged system was part of the chickens. Like he didn't just buy the chicken; he bought the whole setup. Did he not? Like that was my impression.
I didn't get that impression because he's in the same
the
traveling
same, like, wagon, right?
Yeah, and he literally is going to throw the chicken on that same illuminated stage, and he just thinks he's a smart chicken, and it's like there's no such thing,
Wow, so he's really screwed then.
That was what I came up. I mean, I think it's even more grim than you give it credit for. I think it's he literally throws away the thing that had any value at all and is taken in by a charlatan in another town who's like, "Yeah, I'll sell you my chicken." He's $2,000. It's like, okay.
Yeah, but I think the idea of like that the masses will demand mindless entertainment over high-minded entertainment. Like that's really ultimately what the quote unquote moral of this one is about for me.
For sure.
Which is also as depressing as throwing a limbless person off of a bridge. They're both pretty depressing thoughts.
Yeah.
The fourth short film, All Gold Canyon. A grizzled prospector arrives in a pristine mountain valley. He begins digging soil samples and panning through them. And he arrives at possibly a major gold deposit, which he calls Mr. Pocket. What did you think of this one, All Gold Canyon?
I like this one too. I mean, I loved most of this movie.
I like this one because this is the only one with a happy ending, right?
Well, it's brutal, and it's also I mean, I guess it's a happy ending, but it's also desperate and I mean, what this guy he goes through hell. I mean, it's sort of like the beginning of There Will Be Blood.
No, it very much reminds when he's in the hole and he's digging, right? Yeah.
He's like this singular man out in the middle of nowhere, and the world doesn't care if he lives or dies, and he's driven by this passion and working to the bone on really what is just a massive gamble, and then strikes it. And
there's someone there to take it away from him. Right?
There's someone there to take it away from him. And the fact that he is shot and bleeding and remains motionless.
Yeah.
This like sheer force of will to like just stay there motionless because he knows he's going to have an opportunity to turn the table.
Yeah.
It's I thought that was rad.
It's it's an amazing moment. And you like when he gets shot, you are seeing the movie from the perspective of the other dude who shot him.
Right.
You're like, he shot him, and you're sitting there and he's smoking a little tobacco and he's like, oh yeah, you're waiting it out to see if this guy's going to move. And if he doesn't, he's dead. And so you are now in that guy's perspective. And then when the Tom Waits comes back to life, it shocks you as well, right?
And I love how patient the filmmakers are. Like they sit in there, he sits there and he waits, and you just have to sit there with him. And it's just like long time that they just sit there.
Yeah.
And he doesn't move an inch. And that's this guy's being smart. He's being smart. He's going to make sure that dude's dead. And then he's not.
Yeah.
It's so great. It's so great.
I really liked it. And this is I thought this is the most beautiful episode of them all. Like that valley is so gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's like
And it like
otherworldly. Yeah.
and it does a lot of stuff where it just will sit on a deer and show us trickling stream next to a meadow, and it definitely revels in that.
This one
And
doesn't feel like it has as much of a moral to me. Like I thought there was going to be this idea of that this land is so beautiful, and this guy just comes in it and like fucks it all up with all these holes. And I thought it was going to be about how, if you just weren't if you just had enjoyed the land for what it was, and you weren't greedy, everything would have been fine. But but then the guy gets away with it and it's fine. So
yeah.
So I did think I wasn't sure like what the point of this one was, like what if it was trying to say anything, other than just being like a really fun little vignette of like what happens when people are. Like, yeah, he goes through a lot and then comes out triumphant. And,
Yeah, there's something about what he's willing to put himself through.
Yeah.
But yes, it is uncharacteristically rewarding for him to actually have done all that.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the gal who got rattled, about Alice Longbow, played by, I believe, Zoe Kazan, right?
Yeah, this is my favorite one.
This is a really good one,
Yeah. It's amazing.
It's great, and it's they fall in love. She falls in love with Billy, right? Played by Bill Heck, who I think is a relatively newcomer to the scene.
I thought it when he first rode up. I'm like, is that Keanu Reeves? It kind of looks like Keanu Reeves, but yeah, he's great. She's great.
He's been in a bunch of TV stuff.
Yeah,
but he hasn't been in that many movies, and yeah, I mean, like. This is like this movie had like eroded my desire to live by this point in time, and I'm like, oh, these people are falling in love. Like, oh, Jeff, I'm feeling like happy feelings of this couple, this unlikely couple falling in love, and like maybe everything's gonna be okay, but like don't be too happy, Dave, because something terrible is probably gonna happen because someone dies in every single one of these.
Yeah.
Some people think this whole thing is about death, right? Like, and I think ultimately, of course, the last one is very much about death. But, yeah, I mean, what a painful ending for this one, right? Where it's like
so
it's
great,
like The
though.
Mist all over again. If you've seen that movie,
yeah, but you don't see it coming at all, right? I did not see that coming at all.
Yeah, I mean, you knew something bad was going to happen.
We definitely knew something bad was going to happen, but man,
the way it plays out is very unpredictable, right? Like, because you expect like Billy to go out and find her, right? Or you expect it to play out very differently.
Yeah,
and
it's so wonderfully set up, like the slow play of their courtship and awkward conversations, and really making it about them when it also is beautifully illustrating this relationship between the two what would you call them, caravan wranglers? I don't know, the two cowboys. Their relationship is beautifully illustrated, and you clearly get a sense that the older guy is not approving of what's going on, and yet he ultimately is willing to give his life to save her, and like he is redeemed in a certain way, and he is his true colors are shown in a very, I think, heroic manner. He becomes like my favorite character in the whole thing, of like just how ready to go he is about the whole thing. It's just so badass the way it all goes down. Her just sort of wandering off to get the dog, and then what that spirals into is I mean, I've often talked about how I love movies like, this will be a strange reference for you, but I love movies like Judgment Night, where it starts out being,
deep cut, Jeff.
Yeah, it starts out being one movie, and then like, oh, we took the wrong exit off the freeway, and it just becomes a completely different movie. And that's kind of how it feels in this movie, where it's like, if it wasn't for this one moment, this would have been a completely different movie. But now here we are, and we're in this, and we're off the rails. Yeah, and then of course that last, she just didn't wait long enough. But she she took his advice. She like listened really strongly to what he said. And of course, if you saw him go down like that, you'd be like, well, fuck it. It's what he told me to do. It's so good, man. I loved this one.
I just
so
knew
much.
that dog was going to get someone killed. Like, it's just
Yeah.
right from the top. I just knew
Yeah.
that dog was going to get someone killed.
And there's sort of an air of Game of Thrones, like the first book / season of Game of Thrones when Daenerys is she's walking, she's going to be sold to Khal Drogo, and her brother is such a pompous ass. Like it's the same kind of dynamic with that situation, you know. So I had to call back to that. I don't know. I loved this.
I think this is a great one. Zoe Kazan, like completely unrecognizable. The last thing I saw her in was, I think, like The Big Sick. And that is just such a vastly different performance in this. Very impressed by her. But yeah, this one is one of the best. Like it's certainly the best told story from my perspective. It's also it's so sad. It's so sad, Jeff. Everything here, everything in this movie is so depressing. But what a sweet romance, and the way it develops, and like the dialogue between them is so perfect.
But like, don't leap to conclusions. Like don't make sure.
Wait until the last possible minute before executing yourself. Is the moral of the story, right?
Yeah.
This is the one where I felt like the book, like the ending of the book, that page that you see, like adds the most.
So good, right?
Because
he didn't know what he was going to say.
He had no idea what he was going to say to Mr. Knapp, right?
It's so good. It's so like that's how you end the story. Is like, I have no idea what I'm going to say to that guy.
Well, how is that conversation going to go?
Yeah, because clearly he knew that the dude didn't approve, and like he goes out in the woods, and then his wife to be is dead. Like that's a whole other movie where the dude thinks he killed her or he doesn't trust him, and I don't know.
Yeah, which is kind of like kind of a bummer of these things is like a lot of these short films are like what the premise of a feature-length Coen Brothers movie is.
Yeah.
Like, oh, he threw a dude over the edge of the bridge. Like that's where a Coen Brothers movie would begin, right? And then and then you just like see how that plays out, right? In the pursuit of money, which a lot of these things are, So this is a really well done, well executed piece of work, and also extremely beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. Just the shots of the caravan are just spectacular.
Yeah, it's just like insane the amount of work that like they're on the actual Oregon Trail, right? So or like a version of the Oregon Trail. They're heading to Oregon. Yeah. Let's talk about the last one, The Mortal Remains. About these people riding a stagecoach to Fort Morgan. And then as the ride goes on, you realize that maybe it's not a regular stagecoach, right?
No,
so
do you think they're all dead?
About this, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't feel like I didn't come away from this one understanding what I was supposed to come away from it with,
Yeah.
I obviously the Dutchman, that the rider of the driver of the stagecoach is always shown in a very spectral way, ethereal way that it kind of gets you the feeling like maybe these people are all dead and they're heading to the afterlife. The last shot when they arrive at the hotel and the doors open and you see the stairway that's illuminated very dramatically as if it's heading into an afterlife. So clearly there's overtones of that, but all of their conversation on the ride, the weird fear that they show of the two guys with the dead body, how it ends, I just didn't. I would love for you to tell me what you came away with, because I didn't know what I was supposed to take from that one.
I think that the idea, the objective of this one is simply to depict a group of people's journey to the other side, and to make you interrogate for yourself, like, how will you handle that journey? One of the bounty hunters gives that monologue about like what people do when they're like negotiating, right, with themselves, like the passage to the other side. and how they handle it, and like people handle it differently. Like some people are really at peace, some are like terrorized by it, and it you know, Shakespeare called it the undiscovered country, right? Like this land from which like no one has ever returned, and you know, it is one of the biggest questions: what happens to you after you die? And I think that's what this is trying to bring out is it's asking you like, what kind of person will you be when that day comes? That's very basic, but you know, kind of my understanding of it. Does it resonate with you in any way?
Yes, I just structurally, I didn't feel like it brought me there. And the weird,
because the
tone
dialogue is very, it doesn't seem super introspective, right? Until that point, right?
Yes, and there's this weird sort of petty disagreement. I thought Tyne Daly was great. I loved seeing her, but and then there's this weird tone at the end where they have they have a dead body with them.
Yeah,
and everyone is kind of weirdly frightened of it. I just didn't. It just lands, I think, with a strange. I don't know. I found it unclear.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was odd that you have bounty hunters with an actual dead body. Like that,
Right.
that just kind of muddies the metaphorical waters a little bit.
Yes.
But I think the way that like the color grading on the outside of the coach and it's almost like magical the place they show up at the end. It does really signal to me that they are dead. All those characters.
Yeah, I got that as well, but it didn't. I feel like there was an opportunity to really make that resonate in some profound way, and I don't know if they were even going for that, and I don't know what they were going for, to be honest.
Yeah.
So for that to be the final story in a sequence of ones that I just thought were great, it did leave me a little bit on a discordant note. I just felt like
every one of the previous ones like really lands with a major impact, right?
For sure.
Like a very visceral feeling, whereas this one just leaves you kind of feeling unsettled. Right?
Yes. Yeah. And maybe that's by design.
Yeah, I think that might be the case. So overall, Jeff, sounds like you thought it was a masterpiece. I thought it was really well made, and if you're in the right mood for it, I think you'll really enjoy it. And I don't know that I was in that mood. So,
Well, I mean, it's a credit to the fact that these kinds of things can be made now, that Netflix exists, that these services exist, and you can kind of create this kind of art now. I think this is pretty exciting.
Yeah, indeed. All right, man. Well, this has been a lot of fun to talk about.
I agree.
Hope people have enjoyed listening to it, and hope you have a great week on this week that has no episode of the Slash Filmcast. This will tide you over until our review of Creed 2 next week.
Ooh, so excited.
Creed 2. See you guys later.